Listening is a key skill for professional success. Our ability to listen affects not only how other people judge our competence as communicators, it also affects how other people judge our overall performance at work. Because technological advances have expanded the number of choices we have about how and when to listen, it is particularly important for us to learn to develop active listening skills so that we can be certain that we're not missing important messages from others. Listening serves 4 key purposes. First, we listen to acquire information. This may place different demands on our listening skills based on the importance or complexity of the message to which we're listening. Secondly, we listen to screen and evaluate the many messages that we receive each day so that we can avoid becoming overloaded with all the information that's coming our way. Third, we listen to enjoy and to relax, which are important for our good mental health, but they can become problematic if we take a too relaxed approach to listening in certain situations. Finally, we listen to get along with other people. This is important in developing the relationships that will help us succeed professionally and personally. So what do good listeners do differently from poor listeners? Well, first of all, good listeners take the time and make the effort to listen in an active manner. You see, most people tend to default to a passive listening approach. Passive listening is listening without putting forth real effort, without really being concerned about what's communicated. And people listen passively all the time and for a variety of reasons. Sometimes we're simply bored with the message and maybe we think we've heard it before. Perhaps we're just tired physically or mentally, so it's difficult for us to put out the effort that's required. Sometimes we listen passively because we're apathetic about the message or the person from whom we're receiving it. Active listening, on the other hand, requires making a substantial effort to pay full attention to what's being communicated. Active listening is important. It increases your ability to understand messages by increasing the engagement and care with which you listen. Active listening can also encourage greater enthusiasm and appreciation on the part of the person sending the message, making it easier for them to communicate the points that they need to make. And active listening is also crucial for successfully navigating disagreeable or uncomfortable interactions. Now, while it's important to put effort and attention into our listening, that alone isn't enough. You see, good listeners also look like they're listening. People count on nonverbal body language to help them understand if someone is fully listening and fully engaged with what they're saying. And so it's important as listeners for us to indicate our interest in the conversation. Good listeners focus their full attention on the communicator. They're not looking in another area of the room. They don't have one earbud in one ear, or worse yet, earbuds in both ears. They're not talking on the phone. They're not texting. They're absolutely focused on the conversation at hand. Second, good listeners use kinesics, which is body orientation. They lean in a little bit towards the speaker. They have their body fully facing the individual who's speaking. They use gestures that say, go ahead, keep talking, I'm listening. They offer eye contact that indicates openness and receptivity to messages, and their facial expressions communicate interest in the conversation. So you might wonder, who's responsible for my listening anyway? Well, senders of messages do have responsibilities. Senders are responsible to understand the content that they're planning to communicate before they start speaking. Senders should carefully consider the way in which they communicate messages, and they need to ensure that messages are appropriate for the context or occasion. It's helpful if senders can design their messages with particular receivers in mind. And of course, we should always be mindful about the particular implications of the particular messages we might be sending. But receivers also have important responsibilities. We already said it's important to make an effort to listen, but it's also important to consider the physical and social context of the messages you're receiving, and to be sure to give the sender a fair hearing before you start thinking about how you might respond in a negative way. You should provide senders with feedback so that they can understand how their messages are affecting you. And it's important to manage our responses to the content of the message as well as the way it's being delivered. Now, there is one more important element that we need to address, and this is the whole concept of self-talk. How does self-talk affect our ability to listen to other people? Well, the particular background and package of skills that we bring to any listening encounter, our self, influences our ability to assume responsibility for our listening. And self-concept and self-esteem both affect self-talk. What is self-concept? Well, a quick review. Self-concept is who I think I am. Self-esteem is how I feel about the person that I think I am. And both self-concept and self-esteem influence the kind of internal dialogue that you have going on inside your head. It's a kind of a running commentary on everything that you do and everything you experience. So that self-talk, which is made up of that sort of self-concept and self-esteem, having a little dialogue, can be negative or positive. It influences how you listen, what you perceive, and how you process the things that other people say and do. Positive self-talk can make you more likely to seek understanding and to be open to criticism when you're listening to another person. But negative self-talk can make you more likely to become critical or defensive when you're listening to others. People with relatively high self-esteem can replace any negative self-talk that arises with positive statements that can help them to better process and filter messages. So here's a quick list of some listening strategies that can be helpful. First of all, when you're listening, check for misunderstandings. Don't make assumptions about the messages that you're hearing. Check for objective facts versus personal opinions. Ask for clarification if you need to be sure that you are interpreting the message correctly. If you're certain that you've interpreted the message correctly, you can still check your perception even further by asking for further explanation of, for example, why a person has decided to share a particular message with you. And of course, you should check your self-talk because you want to make sure you're not reacting defensively or with anger. And then finally, check to see how much of what you hear is a function of you, the sender, and how much of it is a function of the actual messages that are being sent.